Welcome to Speaking History, friends. History is filled with powerful women who ruled nations and empires, but some left a different kind of mark, one shrouded in scandal and whispers of their unrestrained desires. In this second part of our exploration, we dive into the lives of 6 women leaders whose personal passions have sparked endless debate and fascination. From Roman empresses to queens of Europe, their stories offer a tantalizing glimpse into the private lives of history's most enigmatic rulers. Maria Luisa of Spain, Holy Roman Empress. She belonged to 2 royal families. Her father was the brother of King Carlos III of Spain, and her mother was the eldest daughter of King Louis XV of France. At the age of 14, she was married to Carlos IV, her cousin. While the marriage took place, everyone knew they weren't meant for each other. Carlos IV, despite being presentable, was lazy and dim-witted, whereas Maria, despite lacking beauty, was sharp, intelligent, and self-serving. To gauge Carlos IV's personality, it suffices to note that he didn't even indulge in mistresses. Maria, on the other hand, was witty, robust, and deeply attracted to handsome men. Once, Carlos III remarked to his father, "It is very difficult to prevent royal women from indulging in immorality due to the lack of suitable men for them." Maria's lively and dominant personality quickly overshadowed her docile and submissive husband, who was unable to assert himself against her. He was so intimidated by her that he didn't dare speak in her presence. Maria, fully aware that no one, including her husband, would stand in her way, surrounded herself with young, attractive military officers who eagerly sought to fulfill the sexual desires of the queen. Despite her unremarkable looks, Maria was relentless. She established what was practically a male harem within the palace through her lovers. Initially, she had affairs with noblemen, ministers, and high-ranking officials, but later, she lowered her standards so much that nearly anyone could share in her indulgence. She even targeted low-ranking government officials. Interestingly, Carlos IV was well aware of his wife's escapades, but chose to ignore them. When informed by palace spies that Maria was pursuing relationships with common servants, he reportedly said, "If she doesn't satisfy herself, who will?" Clearly, one man isn't enough for her. Maria gave birth to a dozen children, 5 of whom died in infancy. Several pregnancies were also terminated. Whether the surviving children were Carlos's remains uncertain. Due to her debauchery, by the age of 28, Maria looked like an old cow, and by 36, she had lost all her teeth. She compensated for this by getting gold teeth, which she believed restored her beauty. Her sexual exploits began soon after her marriage. When Carlos III learned of her antics, he ordered her to be kept under surveillance by military guards. However, Maria seduced the head of the guard and other officers, thwarting all attempts to contain her. In 1788, when Carlos III passed away, Carlos IV became king, granting Maria even more freedom and power. The hapless king, already under her influence, became entirely subservient, and state affairs were conducted under her direction. Among her numerous lovers, one stood out, Manuel de Godoy, a young soldier in the royal guard and a minor provincial official. 16 years her junior, Godoy quickly became her favorite and benefited immensely from her affection. Despite his humble background, Maria elevated him to wealth and prominence. Under her influence, Carlos IV appointed Godoy as a general and later made him a duke, a rank just below a prince, reserved for rulers of vast estates. Manuel de Godoy rose from obscurity to power, but Spain, as a nation, was teetering on the brink of disaster. Maria's ambition to make Godoy even more illustrious would have dire consequences for the country. One day, she approached King Carlos IV and said, "I want to appoint my lover, Manuel de Godoy, as the prime minister of the country." Hearing this, the king, for the first time in ages, suddenly became furious and roared, That's an utterly ridiculous idea, and you should remove it from your mind. But his anger deflated like a soap bubble the very next moment when Maria said, "You will appoint him as the Prime Minister. You have to do it. I've already promised him that he will hold this position." Saying this, she adjusted her gown and left the room without waiting for a reply. And, as expected, things unfolded exactly as she wanted. At the age of 37, Maria Luisa, in 1788, fell in love with 21-year-old Manuel de Godoy, an ordinary man. It is said that he became her favorite due to his masculine charm and his unique ways of engaging with women. Riding on the back of this sexual affair, he rose rapidly to become Spain's prime minister in just 4 years, in 1792. Completely unfamiliar with the complexities of administration and politics, his primary duty as prime minister remained the same as before, satisfying Maria Luisa's insatiable desires. The German diplomat stationed in Spain at the time described his routine, writing, "From 8 a.m. until noon, he assists the Queen with horseback riding lessons. Then, the Queen returns to the palace, and the King becomes absorbed in his own activities. As soon as the King is occupied, Godoy arrives at the palace to gratify the Queen's sexual desires before retreating to his quarters." The room, next to Queen Maria Luisa's chamber, was assigned to the Prime Minister, and a small side door between their rooms ensured that all important matters, which everyone was aware of, were carried out discreetly. Godoy fulfilled the lustful demands of the Queen, but this unattractive woman couldn't satisfy his aesthetic desires. He took a mistress named Josefa, who bore him 2 children. When Maria learned of this, she arranged for Godoy to marry one of her husband's relatives in 1797, but Godoy continued visiting his mistress. Infuriated, Maria became infatuated with an exceptionally handsome young nobleman, discarding Godoy like a squeezed lemon. She began changing her lovers weekly, driven by her reckless lust and determination to show Godoy that she had never relied solely on him. Maria's behavior promoted countless attractive young soldiers, rewarding their bravery not on the battlefield, but in her bedroom. It is worth noting that her affair with Godoy produced a son and a daughter, whose illegitimacy was an open secret. By this time, Maria and Godoy's sexual relationship had dwindled to almost nothing, but as Prime Minister, he continued to enjoy the Queen's favor. Meanwhile, the people of Spain had grown deeply resentful of Manuel de Godoy. A revolution was brewing, waiting only for a trigger which soon arrived. In 1703, under Maria Luisa's influence, King Carlos IV granted Godoy even more authority. Godoy abused this power, introducing highly unpopular policies, sparking widespread rebellion across the country. Furious citizens turned their wrath toward the cursed trio of the Queen, King, and Prime Minister, determined to eliminate them for good. Realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, the incompetent Godoy, the cowardly Carlos, and the insatiable Maria Luisa fled the country, seeking refuge in Rome. There, the Queen passed away in 1819. During her reign, Spain witnessed devastation and turmoil, much of which could be attributed to Queen Maria Luisa. Her unrestrained sexual pursuits not only tarnished the royal family's dignity, but also led her husband astray, elevated an unqualified man like Godoy to power, and caused her to neglect her own people entirely. Livia Drusilla. Roman Empress Livia was born in 58 BCE into a respected and noble Roman family, deeply rooted in ancient traditions. This woman, endowed with enchanting beauty, was also blessed with exceptional intelligence. Her mesmerizing personality and attractive features were so captivating that she could ensnare even the most powerful men with a single glance. When her youth bloomed, she was married to Tiberius Claudius Nero, a young man from her own family, and bore 2 sons, Tiberius and Drusus. Livia's life took a dramatic turn when Emperor Augustus saw her at an event and fell deeply in love at first sight. Ambitious as she was, Livia returned his affections, and soon the two were sharing a bed. Augustus became so infatuated with her charms that he couldn't bear the thought of being apart from her. However, Livia was already married, which limited her interactions with Augustus. To overcome this obstacle, the emperor demanded Livia from her husband, intending to eliminate him if he refused. However, the nobleman dared not disobey the imperial command, and thus Augustus married his mistress, elevating her to the status of empress. Interestingly, Livia's first husband attended the wedding as a special guest. Another notable fact was that Livia was already pregnant when she married Augustus, and the child's paternity was uncertain. Nonetheless, she gave birth to a son a few months later, whom Augustus adored. This love allowed Livia to meddle in state affairs to such an extent that Augustus's name was on the throne, but the commands were hers. Once in the royal palace, Livia's indulgent nature came to light. Although Augustus built several temples in her honor, constructed a city, and showered her with lavish gifts, Livia still sought satisfaction for her desires with young soldiers. Over time, her boldness grew to the point that she would eliminate anyone who crossed her path. Driven by her ambition, she desired that her biological son, Tiberius, ascend to the throne instead of Augustus's other heirs. To achieve this, she systematically removed all potential claimants using unprecedented and covert methods. Her cruelty and secrecy were so extreme that even the devil might have been awed by her deeds. Meanwhile, Livia's unbridled lust also reached its peak. Despite her royal status, she engaged in relationships with palace servants and guards. Whenever she saw a strong, handsome man, she seduced him into her fold. On one occasion, some young men were found completely naked in the palace. When they could not justify their state during an investigation, they were sentenced to death. However, Livia intervened, claiming that naked men could not tempt her, sparing their lives because she had summoned them for her personal needs. This incident highlighted the extent of her insatiable desires. In 12 BCE, when Augustus's son-in-law died under suspicious circumstances, an act attributed to Livia, she pressured Tiberius to marry Augustus's young widowed daughter, Julia, becoming the stepfather to Augustus's grandsons. Though Tiberius initially resisted, Livia ignored his objections, and the marriage took place. Livia's ambition was solely focused on securing the throne so she could rule through her son. After the marriage, Tiberius voluntarily exiled himself to the island of Rhodes. Years later, when he sought to return, Augustus refused, as he had become committed to making his grandsons the heirs. However, when the two grandsons mysteriously died, acts attributed to Livia, Tiberius's return was facilitated, and Augustus reluctantly declared him as his successor. Many believe this decision, too, was made under Livia's pressure. In 14 CE, Emperor Augustus died, with some accounts suggesting that Livia was responsible for his death. Overjoyed, Livia installed Tiberius on the throne, continuing to influence his decisions. Her ruthless grip on power and shameless personal life tolerated no interference, to the extent that even her grandson, Germanicus, fell victim to her lethal intrigues. Livia's reign of terror and control over the Roman Empire lasted until her death in 29 CE. Her tyrannical and immoral life left the people of Rome in constant fear. The Romans remembered this cruel and wicked woman as the bloodthirsty she-wolf. With her passing, a wave of relief swept through the empire. Poppaea Sabina. Roman Empress Poppaea Sabina, born in 35 CE, was the daughter of Titus Aulus, a prominent figure executed during Tiberius's early purges. Her name was derived from her maternal grandfather, Poppaeus Sabinus, a high-ranking government official. When Poppaea came of age, she captivated countless individuals with her extraordinary beauty. Her allure was so profound that anyone who saw her longed to dedicate their gaze to her face. As she blossomed into womanhood, even the elderly of Rome sighed for her, leaving one to imagine the impact she had on the youth. Endowed with unparalleled beauty, a magnetic personality, and remarkable intelligence, Poppaea Sabina possessed a cunning nature. She exploited her charms and seductive prowess to captivate hearts, stepping over them as she advanced toward her ambitions. Although her beauty quenched the thirst of many admirers, she had a singular goal: to become the Empress of Rome. Once she set her mind to it, no obstacle could stand in her way. At the age of 18, in 58 CE, she married Rufius Crispinus, a Roman nobleman, and soon bore him a son. However, her flirtatious nature led her to become the mistress of Otho, a close friend of Emperor Nero. Otho, known for his striking looks, eloquence, and refined style, fell under her spell. To sustain their affair, Poppaea abandoned her husband and child, marrying Otho instead. Through him, she was introduced to Nero, and her dreams began to materialize. Nero, smitten with her charms, was ensnared by her coy glances and suggestive smiles. Poppaea's intimate relationship with Nero introduced him to unprecedented pleasures, making him increasingly infatuated. Although not the first woman in his life, Poppaea's allure and mannerisms were unmatched. Recognizing Nero's obsession, she capitalized on it, demanding that he elevate her status above even his concubines. Nero, eager to please her, fulfilled her every desire. Poppaea orchestrated Otho's appointment as governor of Lusitania, a distant province, effectively removing him from her path. Despite opposition from Nero's mother Agrippina and his wife, Empress Octavia, Nero openly indulged in his affair with Poppaea. Feeling insecure, Poppaea manipulated Nero, convincing him to eliminate Agrippina, whom she claimed controlled him like a puppet. Agrippina warned Nero that Poppaea would prove dangerous, urging him to prioritize his marital alliance with Octavia. However, Nero, entranced by Poppaea's seductive allure, had Agrippina executed in 59 CE, with Poppaea's influence playing a significant role. After 4 years as Nero's mistress, Poppaea became pregnant in 62 CE. Meanwhile, she and Nero conspired with a military officer, Tigellinus, to disgrace Octavia by framing her in an illicit affair. Poppaea's scheming bore fruit as Octavia was caught in a staged encounter with a Greek slave. Nero divorced her and married Poppaea, fulfilling her ultimate ambition to become empress. However, Octavia's dismissal sparked public outrage, escalating into violent protests that Nero brutally suppressed. Even as empress, Poppaea felt threatened by Octavia's existence. She conspired with Nero's officials and used her charm to manipulate him further. Eventually, Octavia was exiled to a small island, where she was either coerced into suicide or tortured to death. In 63 CE, Poppaea gave birth to a daughter, Augusta, who tragically died 4 months later. In 65 CE, she became pregnant again. By this time, Nero's rule was faltering, with rebellion looming, and Poppaea's grip on him tightened. However, Nero's governance deteriorated under her influence. Amid these tensions, Nero, in a fit of rage, kicked the pregnant Poppaea, causing her and the unborn child's death. Stricken with guilt, Nero later declared her a goddess by state decree. Historians agree that while Poppaea wielded immense influence, her character was as notorious as Agrippina's, marking her as one of Rome's most scandalous women. Caroline of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel, the Queen of United Kingdom, the daughter of the Duke of Brunswick, Caroline, was unattractive and awkward from childhood. Her habits were intolerable, and her behavior was detestable. She was not only sharp-tongued, rude, and wild, but also extremely deceitful. Once, she humiliated her parents in public by falsely claiming she was pregnant. A medical examination exposed her lie. Later, she told her mother, "You stopped me from going to the dance hall, so I took revenge by claiming I was pregnant." Caroline's marriage to Prince George, the Prince of Wales, was politically motivated. Reluctantly, he agreed to marry his sharp-tongued cousin as his wife. At an event where they were introduced, George said nothing to Caroline, but she remarked, "Is this the Crown Prince George? He's so fat. His portrait looks much better than him." This statement sealed her future, as George realized he could never love this short, blunt, and uncouth girl. Nevertheless, the two married on April 8th, 1795. Shortly after the wedding, Caroline began spreading rumors within the palace. She told one of her maids, "Nothing happened on the wedding night. The impotent prince sat on a chair near my bed and slept all night." The maid shared this sensational news with other staff, and somehow it reached George, who could never forgive Caroline for her actions. On January 7th, 1796, Caroline gave birth to a daughter, Charlotte. George, who had fervently wished for a son, was deeply disappointed at the birth of a daughter. He soon composed himself and entrusted the upbringing of the generous princess to governesses, ensuring she wouldn't grow up under her ill-mannered mother's influence. Around this time, Caroline was furious about George's interactions with another woman and was infuriated by his will, which left her with little benefit. Consequently, she first moved to a separate part of the palace and later to Montague House in Blackheath with dozens of servants. Among these were George's spies, who reported all her activities to the palace. The spies informed George about the parties and shameful gatherings Caroline hosted at her new home. She invited naval officers daily and took her favorite young men to her bedroom. Her gatherings included only handsome young men with whom she formed sexual relationships, compensating for George's indifference. She embraced shamelessness entirely, wearing sheer clothing that left her almost naked. As the Prince of Wales' wife, her immoral activities tarnished the royal family's reputation. On one occasion, Caroline claimed an adopted boy was her biological son, but investigations revealed he was neither her legitimate nor illegitimate child. Caroline presented herself as a wronged princess before the Whigs of Britain, garnering some sympathy. However, instead of improving her lifestyle, she further degraded it. During her travels in Italy and Switzerland, her misconduct continued, with several men granted access to her bedroom. During this time, she also became the mistress of a handsome man. It is worth noting that George's spies followed her everywhere, reporting her actions back to the prince to gather solid evidence for divorce proceedings. In 1820, after the death of King George III, George became King George IV. Caroline suddenly returned to London, hoping to attend the coronation ceremony and assume the title of Queen of England. However, her lofty dream was soon shattered. The coronation ceremony was held at Westminster Hall, surrounded by tight security. Soldiers were strictly instructed not to let Caroline enter. When she attempted to enter, the guards stopped her. She was shocked that mere guards could dare to act this way and exclaimed, "I am the Queen! Why are you not letting me in?" The soldiers, without responding, forcibly removed her and shut the door. The legal battle continued, but Caroline achieved nothing. After this humiliation and disgrace, she passed away on August 7, 1821, leaving behind all the negative aspects of her tainted personality. Christina, Queen of Sweden. Maria Eleonora of Brandenburg was in her room with her attendants, while her husband, Sweden's king Gustavus Adolphus II, paced impatiently. Maria was about to give birth. Finally, Gustavus heard the loud cry of a baby and assumed that God had blessed him with a beautiful son to inherit the throne. However, when he learned that Christina was born instead, he did not despair. He remarked, "This little girl will undoubtedly grow up to be brilliant, because she has already fooled us." Born on December 18, 1626, Christina was unlike ordinary children. Her body had many unusual features, and her voice was unusually deep, such that when she cried, it sounded like a boy. At just 6 years old, following her father's death, she was named heir to the throne. Alongside formal education, she received training in politics and statecraft. The government was initially managed by regents appointed by her father, gradually transferring power to Christina. Upon reaching adulthood, she took full control of state affairs and began making independent decisions. As Christina matured, she developed an attraction to men, which some sources claim led her to establish a harem of handsome men. These men lived lavishly and fulfilled her sexual desires. Her intense libido also manifested in her attraction to women. She became infatuated with beautiful and intelligent girls, using them to satisfy her desires. Christina was particularly obsessed with a woman named Ebba Spara, who was both captivating and bold. Ebba fulfilled Christina's homosexual desires, but eventually eloped with her lover, Count Jacob. This infuriated Christina. When Ebba returned, she had no idea how her former lover would react. Christina threw a candlestick at her in a fit of rage, but the attempt missed. Some historians argue that Christina only meant to frighten Ebba, not kill her, as her love for Ebba was profound. This sentiment is supported by Paul Russell's book, The Gay 100, which cites Christina's letters to Ebba, including a notable excerpt. If you remember the profound effects you've had on me, you'll recall that I was enchanted by your love for 12 years. I am yours to such an extent that you can never lose me, and only death will sever my bond of love with you. After ruling for 10 years, Christina grew weary of political affairs. On June 6, 1654, she abdicated in favor of her cousin Charles, shocking all of Europe. Christina claimed that ruling a nation was burdensome for a woman, and that she wanted to live according to her desires and passions. After abdicating, she moved from Sweden to Brussels and converted to Catholicism on December 23, 1654. This decision dealt a blow to the Protestant world, but Christina stated that faith was a personal matter. Historians suggest that she was drawn to the vibrant rituals of Catholicism, which significantly influenced her conversion. During Christmas of 1655, she met Pope Alexander VII in Rome. Later, she collaborated with France's foreign minister to devise a plan to capture Naples from Spanish control, but it failed. In 1657, during a visit to France, Christina ordered the murder of her close advisor, Riccardo Monaldeschi. Some historians claim Riccardo was killed for threatening to expose Christina's sexual escapades, particularly her homosexuality. After Charles's death, Christina attempted to reclaim the throne in 1660 and again in 1667, but was unsuccessful due to changed circumstances. She eventually settled in Rome, confined to her grand palace, which became a hub of her hedonistic and sexual activities. Christina, who enjoyed wearing men's clothing, lived a life of extravagance and indulgence until her death on April 19, 1689. Evidence that emerged after her death suggested that Christina sometimes resorted to force with her preferred women. During her stay in Paris, she gained notoriety as a woman of excessive lust, seducing numerous men and women and reveling in their company. In Rome, she associated with Cardinal Azzolini and several young men who satisfied her desires. In Brussels, Christina engaged in various sexual activities, earning her the title Queen of Sodom. Sappho of Lesbos. From 1000 BCE to 600 BCE, Greek society and trade underwent numerous ups and downs, but steadily flourished over time. This transformation organized the affluent class formally and encouraged the growth of entertainment, leading to lavish lifestyles. During this era, after Homer's epic poetry and Hesiod's moral verse, Sappho turned her attention to themes of romantic and sensual emotions of women, expressing sentiments such as, Your love loosens my limbs entirely, and it has crushed me like a creeping monster. Sappho was born in the city of Mytilene, or some claim a settlement called Erissos, on the island of Lesbos. The Mediterranean Sea, stretching extensively between coastal cities of Asia Minor and Greek islands, gave rise to vibrant civilizations, and Lesbos was one such island where women enjoyed relatively greater freedom. The period of her birth is debated, with estimates ranging from 600 BCE to the middle of the 7th century BCE. However, some biographers insist that Sappho was born in 740 BCE, 610 BCE. Sappho's mother's name is recorded as Cleis, while her father's name is uncertain, with at least 7 names being mentioned, including Scamandronymus and Simon. According to Salim Rahman, her father likely died in a war between Lesbos and Athens. Sappho is said to have married a wealthy man named Cercolas, who passed away soon after their marriage, leaving her a daughter named Cleis. However, some traditions completely deny the existence of her husband or daughter. There are also references to a romantic involvement with a poet named Alcaeus, and it is said that she was infatuated with a handsome young man named Phaon, who was known to disdain women. Biographers note that Sappho led a group of girls in Mytilene, teaching them music and dance. However, one aspect of this circle led to her infamy, both in her own time and today. Sappho is often accused of being the founder of female homosexuality. According to Desmond Morris, the term lesbianism, originally used as an insult, derives from the island of Lesbos, notorious for this association due to Sappho's expressions of her unconventional love for women in her poetry. A lesser-known term, sapphism, is also used for female homosexuality, and women engaging in it are sometimes called saphists. In Sappho's era, the Greeks referred to this act using the term tribadism, meaning rubbing together. Many biographers mention her alleged relationships with girls in her circle, and even rumors of her being a courtesan. In 1071 CE, her books were declared immoral by Christian authorities in Rome and Constantinople, leading to their burning. The Pope described her as a lustful madwoman. Today, only one complete poem, one nearly complete poem, and fragments of her other works survive, considered rare treasures of literature. In one poem, she writes about a friend. I love her. Her fingers journey across this body of mine. When she caresses me, a tender flame courses through my skin. She mentions names of close friends and students, such as Anactoria, Gongola, and Athis, lamenting their infidelity, expressing passionate thoughts, praising their beauty, or mourning their absence. Some traditions claim that Sappho took her life due to Phaon's rejection, while others argue she died a natural death. Regardless, as long as female homosexuality exists, Sappho's name will remain controversial, as she is often regarded as its pioneer. And that wraps up part 2 of our journey into the intriguing world of history's most infamous women leaders. Their lives remind us how power and passion have always gone hand in hand. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories from history. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think.